This is David Bigham, Isilon Corporate Advisory Engineer. I'm really excited that we have Andrew from Superna with us today. Andrew's going to give us a full demonstration on the Eyeglass for Isilon tool. So thanks for your time, and Andrew, take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. So I'll probably just jump right to it. I'll get rid of the PowerPoint slide. So I'm going to walk you through the A to Z of setting up Eyeglass for Isilon for SyncIQ configuration replication, and I'll talk to some of the other highlights of the product as we go through it. So here you're looking at the login screen. So how did we get to this point? It's a VMware OVF 700 megabyte download. Boot it up, give it a single IP address, and once you've done that, you'll be able to log into the default web page here. A couple things to note here. You can actually use credentials on the cluster, letting you centralize your security inside the cluster. I'm going to go ahead and use local default user and log in. And we get to the main desktop. So I'm going to go through the minimum steps, and that's important just to show how simple it is to get up and running. And then I'll stop and go and look at some other options and configuration things you can do. So if you've got your two clusters, I'm going to use the typical use case of production and DR site, so prod and DR. And those clusters are up and running, and you've already got SyncIQ configured, and you're already replicating, and you've already got shares, exports, and quotas, and other things already configured. So let's go through the steps that you need to complete. So first thing you need to do is add some clusters. So IP address, username, and password. We do have an FAQ on the minimum privileges that are required to function, but I've already done the addition, so I'll skip the actual entering here. So cluster 1, you submit it. Cluster 2, you submit it. And then what you end up with in the inventory tree over here, you end up with your two clusters. So we can just take a quick look here. It's going to go off and do some inventory functions. So there's some shares. There's some existing policies, zone, quotas, and NFS. And as we go forward, this tree will get bigger with more configuration information within it. So there's cluster 1. We'll make 1.3 production, and we've got 1.4, which is our DR site, and so on. So you can see here there's no policy, so we're doing what we call a hot-cold. Your production is all at one site, and the DR site is not replicating back to production. We'd call that a hot-hot configuration. So basically, once you've done that, what additional steps do you need to take? Well, the answer is basically none. So you're done. So if all you wanted to do was take all the shares, exports, and quotas that exist at the SyncIQ policy path and below, then there's no extra steps. You're basically done. And we can see that from this screen right here. What this screen is showing you is, I'll just make this a bit wider. We went and found Sync Policy 1. Auto means we automatically created a configuration replication job to replicate that to the DR site. We verify that the DR site IP address that we were given is in fact the destination for that policy. We create the replication job, and we can see here it says OK, which means it's already completed. It's done. If we want to know what it actually did, we can open it up and take a look. So what we're looking at here is IFS data dir1. That was the SyncIQ policy path. Everything from that level and below, if it's configuration related, got replicated to 1.4 DR site, same destination path. If you do choose to change the path in your SyncIQ policy, then we actually will update the shares, exports, and so on so that they correctly get created with the correct path. But we can see here that auto jobs created, it ran, and it's successful. Policy 2, same thing. The next policies here are of type quota, so it found some quotas. The reason they're in a pending state is because the best practice is to not apply quotas to your DR site. That can interfere with SyncIQ's ability to replicate. So what we do is we synchronize all the quota information inside the cluster and maintain a synchronization state of all the changes in the source cluster. In a DR event, you would come in, select your quota job, and you'd hit run now. But basically, all the quotas that are needed to recover the source cluster are stored now within the appliance. And so they're sitting in a pending state. I'll just jump for a second to the DR dashboard. So how do I know if I'm ready for a DR event? Well, there's two things you need to have to be sure you're ready. If I expand this first SyncIQ policy, I can see the actual SyncIQ policy itself off the cluster. That's your data. You need your data over at the DR site, and we monitor that as well. So OK means the last time it ran, it was successful, and here's the last time it ran in the time. And the second thing you need is your configuration data. If I replicate my data and I can't access it, that's not much good to me. So the Eyeglass configuration replication is also OK. So if I'm OK for both, that means my DR status for that portion of my cluster is OK. If there's any one of these two have an error, then your DR status is not OK. And that tells you need to look at the alarms, the errors, and figure out what's wrong. So for my policy 1 and policy 2, we can see I'm basically fully protected and everything's good. You'll notice I'm just showing you screens, but basically everything that was required to get to this point was simply just add your two clusters. Everything else was automated. So in the event that you want to make changes, and I'll just stop for a second and just sort of reinforce that point. If all you wanted to protect was your SyncIQ configuration for DR, then there was no additional steps. So literally in 10, 11 minutes, you can be fully synchronized between your two sites. If you wanted to do additional configuration, we'll of course allow that to be customized. So if I, for instance, want to customize what we automatically detected, I can go and select this policy, select edit. The checkbox tells me there's something configured or selected in this job. So let's go and look at what that is. So here we can see that share S1 is included. If I have a group of shares and for whatever reason you determine you don't want them synchronized to your DR site, you could edit this job and just deselect them. And it looks like we have an NFS export as well. So if you didn't want NFS at the DR site, not a problem, you just uncheck this. So we do that for every single auto job that you see in the tree. If in some event you may have share data that sits outside of your SyncIQ policies, this may be other application mounts that are needed. It could be backup config. It could be things that you didn't need or want to replicate inside a SyncIQ policy. So we allow for what we call custom jobs. What a custom job allows you to do is create, actually, I'll just pause for a second. Over here on the right-hand side, these ghosted pop-ups, that's actually the replication happening right now. And as they complete, they disappear. So that happens on a 5-minute interval. So this custom job basically allows you to take any source path on the cluster. It'll scan all of the children configuration objects and add them to the custom configuration. The only requirement we have here is that the destination path that you see in the screen, it needs to exist. And because SyncIQ is not running, then you need to manually ensure that that target path exists. As long as it exists, then custom job will happily replicate that data. Same thing here. This is the quota equivalent of quotas that are not inside a SyncIQ policy, and you may just want to replicate them from one site to another. You'd use a custom job to do that. And that's just as simple as add source cluster, some path, and then pick the target and click add, and then the next 5-minute interval. You guys will be able to see that that replicates over to the target site. So this is where all the jobs are managed and monitored. You can see, of course, running jobs here for all the different jobs. I go back to the DR cluster, you can see that this custom job, it ran successfully. If something goes wrong, of course, in this environment right now, there's no active alarms, but we store a history of all the previous alarms. So here's an example of inventory failing details. You can get diagnostic information. Anything that comes back to us from the cluster inventory would all be recorded here. So troubleshooting is often done from here. Logging. This, of course, is our debug log. All activity is logged here. There's a watch function. So if you're watching or debugging something, you can basically tail F this from the GUI and watch the log as it's being processed. In addition, with additional license keys, you can export all of our inventory and logging information can all be sent off to your favorite log analysis tool. So that's the logging functions. So how do you get alarm data, things that break or go wrong? How do you get notified? That's a matter of just adding, in this release, the email notification. Emails, IP of the host. If you require authentication, you enter it here. SMTP or the encrypted port if you need it. And then at this point, any alarms that come in get emailed to you, including additional reporting, which I'll talk about in just a second. So any of the alarms that would normally appear here in real time get sent off through email. So in addition to a configuration replication, there's a built-in function for configuration change management detection. So what does that mean? So basically for all the cluster configuration that we're currently monitoring, and this will increase release over release, we track all the changes. So for instance, if I wanted to know about all the delete actions of the configuration, I can use this interface to quickly filter it, date, time, and the object. So here we can see, a zone being deleted, permissions changing. Basically, anything that's changing on the cluster configuration, you can sort through it here. So why is this useful? If you're running production and something happens to your cluster and you're not exactly sure what changes have been made, you can come in here and know what changes have been made. In this release, we don't know who made the change, but that's being looked at for a future release. More of an audit configuration function. So on a 24-hour basis, a summary of all these changes, so add, delete, and modify, is emailed to you if you've got email configured. So you can basically see what's being changed on the configuration of the cluster day by day, and as an email summary report. A few other things to point out. The menu and the GUI offer the same functionality. In terms of getting upgrades and so on, here you can see the main components that have versions. You can back up the appliance, you can generate a new backup and then download it. We also enable, with an opt-in option, a phone home, so all diagnostics can be emailed to us to assist in any issues, and we'll have basically a weekly copy of the configuration if needed. And that can be turned on. That does require email to function. Let me see if I can log into our web appliance management console. So basically, this appliance is managed over the internet, so security patches can be added. Hopefully I have the right password. So from this screen here, it's going out to check to see if there's any software patches, and it's using an internet repository to do that. This is also the same way that you apply security patches, and by default, the appliance will do a weekly recommended OS patches on the appliance without any user intervention. If there is an update, you would manually apply our patches as required. Here we can see the list of OpenSUSE patches that are here. We do have a built-in firewall. It can be managed from here. Basic health and monitoring of the system can also be done from here. Restarting of any services and so on can be done from here as well, including our software can be restarted from here. So as we deploy updates or features, this is how they'd be applied and delivered to the appliance. I think I've covered all of the main functions that are required in this release to basically protect all of your configuration data. If all things are working normally, one of the key points to be aware of is that, do I need to log into this every day? Well, the answer is no, because we're monitoring the clusters. So if you create a share, we detect the share, we replicate the share. If you delete a share, we will detect that delete and we'll make that change in the target cluster. So basically all actions within the OneFS UI, we track those changes and we automatically apply them to the target. There's basically no day-to-day operational requirement to log into the tool. If you turn on email alarming, everything you need to know is sent to you in an email, and that would be the trigger to log in and look at what's not working. From a DR readiness standpoint, this is not emailed out, so you might want to come in and check to make sure all the jobs are running as expected. If you are making SyncIQ additions or shares, you might want to come in and take a look and make sure they got picked up in the config, and that's about all that's required for major DR operations. Other than that, all of your share, export, and quota management, continue to do that on the cluster as you normally do, and everything else will be automated. So how do you get help? Basically, our help system is built in and indexed, so you simply type in whatever error you might be seeing, and we can hyperlink you directly to how to fix it. If you don't find what you're looking for, you can raise a ticket with us directly from inside the GUI as well, and that'll leave us a support request, and we'll get back to you. So that's fully integrated. That's basically what you need to know.
That's a super demo. I appreciate it, Andrew. Hey, you'd mentioned that you might be willing to share a sneak peek of some of the future options that may be coming to the tool.
Sure. I guess the one that's the most visual, and we just thought it was cool, and we also thought we haven't seen this implemented in other products, and we thought it was quite useful. So how do you manage your DR status of your environment remotely from a mobile phone? Well, we of course could have written a mobile phone app, but someone wrote one for us that we just leveraged, and that would be Twitter. So the appliance itself has its own Twitter feed. Here you can see an announcement of a new qualified release, 7.2.0.1. So we can actually push new updates directly into the GUI in the next release. Late breaking information, FAQs, other things you might want to know about DR and automation, we can push into here. You can, of course, respond to us by clicking the tweet back, and that will get back to us either as a feature enhancement, a question, or anything like that. And then we're also going to allow you to add and authorize the appliance to send all the alarm data to a Twitter handle of your choosing. And now you can basically monitor the status of the appliance and what it's doing from your mobile phone just using a Twitter account. So that's, instead of doing, as we've been asked a few times, what about SNMP? And, we're kind of hoping that protocol just dies and goes away. We thought Twitter was a much better way to manage. Plus, the mobile app is free, so we figured that was a better way to do this. Of course, more DR automation is coming. Our roadmap's getting finalized for the 1.3 release, so there's quite a bit more being done to move through the complete A to Z automation, with obviously the goal being push a button and watch all of your clients' hosts and data fill over magically to their side. So that of course is the destination that we're headed in. But the current release obviously lets you take a lot of the administrative overhead of shares, quotas, and exports, and we're going to be building off of that in the next few releases.
That's awesome.
one last thing, a couple things I can leave with everyone is um, anything new or useful, of course, is on our product landing page. Um, downloads of the appliance data sheet and so on, product documentation is online. But the other thing we wanted to point out was if you want to get your hands on it and try it out, this URL at the top, Eyeglass Online forum, there's an online booking system, and we've got 2 virtual classrooms that you can simply pick a slot that you'd like to register for. You get an email with all the instructions to access it. You get a password, and it's a system with Eyeglass, 2 clusters, and a structured training lab that you can walk through. Probably takes you 45 minutes. It does assume Isilon administration knowledge. Runs it completely over the internet. You get a 2-hour window, so then you get some freeform time to kind of just tinker and check it out and create shares and watch replication work. It's a fully working system. So if you don't see the day and time you like, there's 2 of them you can book. And we are, for this intro course, offering Eyeglass certification, which you get once you submit the course. You get an email back with a logo that you can use. So wanted to make sure everyone understood how to get their hands on it. And if you want the quickest, fastest way to try it out, we recommend the online training system, which is completely free.
That's very nice. It's a lot like our EMCV labs, and I'm sure that lots of our SEs and customers will be taking advantage of that to get their hands on the tool. So, hey, Andrew, thanks so much for joining us again today, and we appreciate your time giving us the demonstration and all of the great information that you shared with us. So, thanks so much. I appreciate it. We'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
And thanks very much for having us. More than happy to provide the training and looking forward to hearing from customers.